Hey, good morning, everybody. Welcome to Home Cooking, and my name is Daniel Cook. I'm the owner of Cook DFW Roofing, and we're here today to talk to you about some tips around your home when it gets cold. And if you have not been outside lately, it's been cold. Woo! Brr. I hate cold weather. Me and my wife have this disagreement all the time. She's from up north, and she's very passionate about hating the hot weather. And so we have this big debate every year when it gets cold. Is she's like all walking around with shorts and flip flops, and I'm in over here with two pairs of underwear and a pair of pants and a cover up, and she's all like, ha ha ha, I feel great. But then in the summertime, I walk around just fine, and she's won't even go outside because it's too hot. But that's for another topic, and that's something that you'll have to deal with whoever you were sharing your home with. But today, we're going to be talking about cold weather tips around your home and some items that you need to be looking at to make sure that your home is set up and ready to go. This is only the beginning of winter. We still have at least 3, maybe 4 more months of temperatures that could get low. So today, Lyndon, are you with us?
I am with you.
All right.
I don't like the real cold. I don't like the real hot. I like paradise. So tell me where that is.
Well, I don't know, man. If you know where that is, I'm going to tell you. You better let me know. Because I really don't. I don't mind the hot weather. I feel like as long as you stay hydrated and you're somewhat in shape, you know, you'll be okay.
Yeah.
This is the problem, though, with hot weather. The average person doesn't get out and exercise a lot of the times. And so their body's not acclimated to sweating and heat, and most people are under dehydrated. So that's what I see in my field.
I agree, and it's a good thing that you are you do love the heat, given your job. I mean, you don't really get to do that a lot when it's good weather or cool weather. But you're 100% correct. I mean, if you look back 40, 50 years ago, people worked outside a lot more, whether it was just at home or their jobs. And I think we weren't sitting under air conditioning 24/7.
Yeah.
Where we had the same temperature. Our bodies have evolved to the point where we don't acclimate good to different temperatures, changing temperatures. It's hard on us.
Yeah, it's a combination of everything. It's people's health, their diets, how much alcohol they drink. I mean, I know some guys, we laugh. So some of our guys on Saturdays or something like that, after a build, they'll kick back and have some beers and everything that night. And then Sunday we'll get together. We'll go out golfing or something like that, and they look like they're green. And I'm like, guys, what's wrong with you? You know? They're like, oh man, I'm like, hey, had too much alcohol. It's hot outside. Right. You can't drink a lot when it's hot.
Well, I think you hit the nail on the head too. I don't think most of us understand what a true hydration level is, and of course, alcohol dehydrates you.
Yeah,
and the troubles that dehydration causes. I mean, there's so many things that can be traced back to being just a little dehydrated, not having the right electrolytes. So I just a quick story. I went to the doctor not long ago because I knew I was kind of dehydrated. I knew I'd been drinking water and I was drinking a lot of caffeine, coffee, stuff like that, and just going hard. And he said it's not that you're just dehydrated. He goes, you're not getting the electrolytes that your body needs for you to function the way you need to function. And so he recommended things like Gatorade, not necessarily Gatorade, but some things like that to get what my body needed back into me. And I think that's where, when you're sweating, you lose a lot of those nutrients. It's not just water. It's a lot of other things that come out of your body. And if you don't replenish it, you're going to feel sluggish. You're going to have headaches. Yeah. There's a lot of different things that dehydration can cause.
Yeah. Dehydration is no joke, and there's a lot of chemicals in your body that you have to have made up properly, or it will cause ripple effects for a long time. So
that's right.
Well, for this subject today, we're going to call back cold weather, though. So cold weather, unfortunately, we just need to cover up more and protect our extremities, fingers and toes and noses and everything like that. And your house is kind of similar to that, Your house has a lot of entrance points of cold weather. Doors, windows, attics, eaves, those items that let in cold air. And that's really what we're trying to combat. Our house is a nice and cozy, it's probably 70, 72 degrees. But if we have 30 and 20-degree weather outside and it's trying to get inside of our house, what do we need to do to stop that from happening? And so there's a lot of things that you need to walk around your home and look at, and this is the perfect time of the year. Actually, 2 weeks ago was a good time to do this.
Yeah.
If you're a little behind, go ahead and do it now, because better now than never. So windows, as they degrade, the caulking around your windows will shrink. And when it shrinks, it's allowing air to bypass that casing and go around it and actually come into the actual sheetrock. And then that air will go through the sheetrock and into the home. And that's just going to happen. And if you don't believe me, go to your windows facing the north. When it's a 20 or 30 mile an hour north wind, put your hand up around the window edges and feel the difference of the temperature when those are right there, and see if you feel any kind of air. And a person a long time ago told me this, a technician I had. He goes, take a piece of paper and put it around your windows and see if you see fluttering. At any kind, it doesn't have to be a lot. It doesn't have to be like this. But if you see movement like this, he said even a feather.
Yeah, feather.
He said, because that way you can see where wind is coming in. And he said, it looks just like a little bit. But he goes, imagine that happening 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, all the time that you're trying to run your heater. This space could get anywhere from 5 to 8 degrees colder if you're letting air come in off of this north window. So your heater never has time to catch up. It's never going to be able to function correctly.
Right. Well, and you got to, it's the equivalent of having just a little drip at your faucet. You put a gallon jug under there and see how fast it fills up with just a little drip.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So windows is one of those critical items that you need to be addressed. And of course, the windows have changed over the years. If you have an older home, you probably have a single or maybe a dual pane window. Those have changed so much. Now there's triple and quad panel windows and different casings and all kinds of stuff that's energy efficient. And I have a friend that just got brand new windows. I mean, windows are stellar looking. I mean, phenomenal. Super expensive though. When you buy windows, you better be ready. It's like buying a brand new Mercedes sometimes. And you put your hand up near his windows, you feel no temperature difference.
Wow.
It keeps the temperature out. You cannot feel the difference. So, but again, windows are different. But for maintenance, you need to get some good outside caulking or sealant that's designed to go around windows, and they make paintable sealants, they make clear sealants, they make colored sealants even. And you'll need to figure out which kind you want to put on there, but you'll need to fill in that gap around your windows, all the way around the brick, the casing, the wood, whatever your windows are cased in, and fill that in. And there's a couple of ways or techniques that you can do this. Some people like to take a wet cloth with them, and they take a dry cloth with them, and they'll put the bead of caulking and seal it down the line. Then they'll take their finger. Some people like to use a little tool they have out in the market, but I don't do that. I just use my finger, and you wet your finger and you glide that sealant down the side, so you smother it in, all those cracks and everything, and make it smooth and look really well. And then you take the wet cloth and you wipe down the residue of the edges, and that way it makes it look really nice and not clumsy like your son maybe you feel again for you. So, but it does take some time. So each window you're probably going to spend 15 or 20 minutes on. So it's not something you're just going to walk out there and knock out in 30 minutes. This is going to be probably a half of a day job.
Yeah. So
every time we get this ask, how much to seal and to go back over my windows, and we always tell them, that's probably $250, $300, because my guy's going to have to stand out there for 4 or 5 hours probably. And then if you have a 2-story house, you think about that. Now you got to go up and down a ladder and move a ladder 2 or 3 times, sometimes for one window.
yeah.
So those does take time. So this is a time-consuming item. It's not something that, is really quickly, but it's very beneficial for you. I suggest, most in sealants and caulkings in the state of Texas and where we live in our region, I know you hear this all the time. I have a 30-year sealant. I have a 40-year sealant. I have a 50-year sealant. I've even started to hear some commercials for lifetime sealants. The problem is that's not going to happen here, guys. So we have so much hot weather, it's going to cause it to shrink. It's going to cause it to crack. It's going to have problems. So you need to be walking out of your home every year, even if you have a house that's only a couple of years old. You probably just need to be doing this to get used to habits and putting it on the calendar.
Yep.
I'm going to go around and look at all my windows every year, and if they're bad, I'm going to go out and fix it. Because believe it or not, if you catch it little by little, maybe you don't have to do all of them every year. Maybe you can say, hey, I'm going to do this downstairs north-facing section of my home this year because I know that's the most important ones. Then I'm going to do the opposite side, later on. There's ways you can handle this, but windows is very critical. So make sure you check your windows. Make sure you check for any openings. Another place that I see quite often that gets ignored is your soffits and your fascia areas around homes. Those soffits, okay, so if you look at the end of your roof line, where the roof line comes out, the very bottom underneath here, okay, that's called a soffit. And then that's going into the attic of your home, basically. And then the fascia board that your roof goes over, should I say like this, that's called your eave, or fascia, should I say. And so when those boards get cracked out, or they start falling down, or they get gaps in them, well, all that air is going into your attic. So if you're mixing your interior home air with outside cold air, well, you get what's happening here. You're dropping the temperature of your attic severely down. And so it's causing that air to come into the home, regardless if you think it's not or not. I mean, that air has to go somewhere.
Right.
And so that's a critical item. So soffits and fascias, sealing cracks in the corners, keeping all that wood closed. That's super important to keep your attic balance there. And when I say attic balance is your attic has a balance. And if it doesn't, that's going to lead to a lot of problems with some of your home items. I always see this too. A lot of people question us, and I see it when I drive around sometimes. I see people take trash bags and they cover their ventilation on top of their roof during the wintertime. And I always hear that, like, oh, that's a good idea. Maybe we should do that. Way no hot air can leave my house. Well, the problem with that is, guess what you're doing? You're causing a whole bunch of humidity and moisture to build up in your attic.
Oh, wow.
Because if all that hot air and all that air moving out of your home doesn't have anywhere to escape, what's going to happen to it? So it's going to combine in your attic, and it's going to get on your rafters, and it's going to get on all your items up in your attic, basically. And it's going to cause moisture buildup. So believe it or not, it's almost impossible to have 100% humidity-free air in your attic or in your home. It just doesn't happen. All the air has some type of water moisture. Sometimes we're heavier than others. Our humidity levels are sometimes 70%, 65%, and sometimes they're 20%. But even when they're low, they still have some humidity. So when you do that cover up with those exhaust vents and those turbines and stuff like that, you're causing the air not to be able to allow that moisture to leave the attic. And it will cause problems over time. It causes corrosion to some of your equipment, your HVAC unit up there in the top, and some of your exhaust pipes. So bad deal to cover up your exhaust. You don't want to cover up your exhaust. It has a role on both the heat and the cold times of the year. So you need to make sure your ventilation is happening, adequately.
That's a good tip. That's a good tip. I bet a lot of people didn't know that.
Well, it happens, and that's what we're here for. But the next thing is that your attic has proper insulation. We talk about this in summertime all the time, right? We want to make sure insulation's there to make sure we hold out that air out from the sun beating down on the roof and everything and causing all that hot air to build up in the attic. Well, the same thing. If you have a nice, cozy home and your attic is not really insulated and you are basically heating the house as much as you can, but you have all this cold air beating down on your home, then it's the same thing. So insulation, both during the summer and winter, is very critical to keep your house very stabilized. So it's a super important item to have year-round, is insulation. And there's all kinds of insulation out there. There's blown-in fiberglass, cellulose. There's rolled insulation. The new stuff on the market right now is a sorghum based. It's a it's an organic insulation. It's not supposed to deplete as fast or shrink, should I say?
Mm-hmm.
And so the R factor stays a lot longer. So there's all kinds of options out there. But if you have a home, I would say probably in that 15, 20-year area, you probably need to start looking at insulation and for sure past that. If you have a 30-year home, you definitely need to look into it.
It's
So,
funny you talked about the shrinking of insulation because I've really not thought about that, but I put insulation in before, and of course, when you pull it out, if it's the the long, what are they, 24 and 18 inches or 16 inches wide, it's
oh
usually
yeah,
what you get.
the
So
rolled
yeah,
insulation.
the rolled insulation. So when you undo it, it puffs out. It gets real thick, and you got to
Mhm.
push it in there. You go back to that house 10, 15 years later, and it's about that thick. I mean,
Yeah,
it's like it disappears.
right.
And and so I'd never really thought about how impactful that could be over time.
Yeah. Well, the new insulation, like I said, is sorghum based. And I don't know if anybody knows what sorghum is, but it's a sweet type of plant that's
Oh yeah.
sorghum. Have you never had that like honey
Well,
molasses type of stuff?
in South Arkansas, we call it sorghum.
Sorghum. Yeah. So it's very similar.
So it's a
Maybe I,
cellulose base, right?
well, it's similar, but it's not. This
Okay.
is a little different. Cellulose is what a lot of insulation was designed from for a lot of years.
Hmm.
This being sorghum, they have developed a situation where it does not shrink. This has some types of compounds in it to where they've tested this stuff for years now, and it does not shrink. And so it keeps its R factor for a long time now. And I don't know how long it's been on the market, but from my understanding, when I talked to some of the representatives from it, they've been testing this stuff for 10 plus years, and it does not shrink and does not lose its R factor. So
Wow.
it's definitely an interesting product. And it's a very economical product compared to regular insulation. Um, so very, very interesting. And I think that's super important to start looking into. You'd be surprised, if you put insulation in your attic, you may spend a couple of $1,000s. If you saved, let's just say 50 or $75 a month on your bill, think of how fast that you could pay that off. And I'm not talking just 1 or 2 months a year you save that. You could literally save that every month probably.
Right.
So, that's a small investment. Within a couple of years, you're paying for that. And then you think about all the years in front of you that you're going to be saving that money. So that's a big deal.
Another great tip. Yeah.
But when we talked about humidity building up in your attic and moisture. And you can tell that when you go up into your attic and you see exposed nails and you see how they get rusty, that's humidity that's built up on those nails. And so when people say, I've never seen any water build up, I've never seen any droplets, condensation or anything. No, you probably haven't. You're 100% right. Unless you have some type of major water intrusion or major condensation problem, you probably never will. But there are micro elements of water in your attic. And you can always see when you go to rust, those nails that are sticking through your decking,
Hmm.
and through your supports and your trestles and all that. Those nails don't get rusted just because they're for no reason. I mean, there's oxidation happening because of water moisture happening inside your attic.
Right.
So that's something that's going to happen. And also inside your attic, majority of the time is your HVAC unit. And your HVAC unit, part of that is your heater, and part of that's your heat exchanger. And the heat exchanger, this is a very common thing to happen, can get rusted and cause it to have holes. And when the holes get into the exhaust tubes, that's allowing carbon monoxide to enter into the attic. So you have to make sure that your heat exchanger gets checked out at least once a year by a certified, HVAC heater, personnel. It's not something that you want to tackle yourself and try to make that decision. Does my heat exchanger look okay? That'd be the last thing that you want to do while your family is sleeping upstairs one night and you think you've looked at your heat exchanger and it's fine, but carbon monoxide is actually seeping out in your house and we have a catastrophic event happen to your family.
Mm.
So I can't stress this enough. You need to have your heat exchanger checked once a year and make sure your heater is safe for your family. And this happens all the time. You know, everybody always says that first time you turn on your heater, it gives you that awful smell, right? Oh my God, what is that smell? Well, that's your heater, and it turns over, and it's burning off all that sediment and all that debris that could be trapped in there. Well, if you imagine that, then you imagine you having a carbon monoxide leak inside of it. It fills up in your attic first. You may not even think about it, and it seeps out slowly. And even a small amount of carbon monoxide can be deadly. So it doesn't take a lot. And this is something I always stress to anybody that asks me, have you had that checked yet? If they say no, I'm like, make the call today, get somebody out here. It's usually 125 bucks, 150 bucks. Have somebody come out here, check this heat exchanger. Let's make sure it's safe. Let's not take any chances with your family on something so minor. So, because it will rust. I've seen them rust. It's incredible.
Yeah.
You know, people think that it's up in their house and it's safe. And how's it going to rust? It doesn't get rained on. There's nothing that ever happens to it. Well, that's just not true. You know, it's going to rust. So, and a lot of times those units get changed out. Sometimes when people get new AC units, but I have seen a lot of times where they change the downstairs unit only and they leave the upstairs the same. So just because you get a new AC, and I've had this question before. I bought this house. They said the AC was brand new 2 years ago. I go up in the attic. It's a unit from 20 years ago. Mm-hmm. So they basically have replaced the downstairs unit, outside unit, and then they've left the upstairs the same because it probably saved them $1,500 on the actual exchange. Mm-hmm. And the guy probably said, yeah, we can get you a brand new unit downstairs. That's all you need. This other one's functioning fine. So that happens, and you need to be prepared to look at that. So just because you told us you got an AC brand new doesn't mean that both units were changed out.
Good info.
Well,
Daniel, what else on cold weather? I mean, you know, obviously most people know about the outdoor plumbing and things like that, but you kind of talked about extremities before. And as I'm thinking about your faucets and, you know, some of the things that people just don't think about. You know, we were always told to leave the faucets dripping, but that doesn't always save you either. What advice do you have as far as protecting your outdoor plumbing or anything like that, indoor plumbing?
Yeah, those are good questions, Lyndon. And the homes that are being built today are different hose bibs than what we grew up with. The hose bib that we grew up with was that simple little hose bib. You turn the faucet and water came out really quickly. Now, if you look at some of the hose bibs and some of them, they have a diaphragm built into them, basically. And it's kind of like a backflow almost that's built into the hose bib that's supposed to be a freeze-resistant hose bib because it's not allowing water to go all the way out to that stem, which is what usually freezes and causes the problem with the hose bib, right?
Right.
So it's causing that to have a backflow built into it so the water won't come all the way out and cause a problem. I don't know, honestly. I'm not a professional plumber. I'm the first one to tell you, get a professional opinion from a plumber on what you think you should do with the hose bibs around your home. I can promise you this. I have those hose bibs on my home. We have a newer home. I still go out and I buy the $4 hose bib protectors. And I put them on my hose bib, and I tighten them down with that little box that has the built-in insulation and everything. Because to me, a $4 box is better than having an emergency happen on the outside of my house that's not supposed to happen.
Right.
So I think it's a pretty good investment on my part. If I got 2 hose bibs and $8 and 10 minutes of my time, I'd rather do that for peace of mind. So I do put those on my hose bibs, and we disconnect the hoses, and that is something. They say that if you leave your hose connected to those newer hose bibs, you will have a problem still. So you have to disconnect hoses, soaker hoses, any type of hoses that you have connected to the hose bibs, those do need to be disconnected, even if you do trust those freeze-proof hose bibs.
Yeah.
So make sure that's done for sure. But yeah, I mean, those are important items. You know, some people also have water softeners near the exterior sides of their homes or their garages. Water softeners, you know, you have water coming in and out of those. And we've seen in the years past where if it gets super cold, the wall and the minimal amount of insulation you had sometimes is not going to suffice protecting those water lines.
Right.
So you may want to look into wrapping insulation around some of those water lines and the water softener on the exterior side of your homes. So water softeners I always see, and they're usually in the corners of the garage or near the edges of the houses because they're trying to keep them out of the way. Well, that's where the coldest air is getting, right beside that wall and that brick. And there's nothing behind there. So if you got, 10-degree air temperature on that water softener for a couple of days, you might have some problems with the pipes.
Sure.
So yeah, keep insulation around. It doesn't take very much time. You get rolled insulation. You can get that insulation that looks like those little swimming noodles.
Mm-hmm.
And you just basically cut it in half and then slide it around the pipe and then take tape and tape it. And that insulates those individual pipes coming in and out of those items also. So,
Daniel, I don't know if you've thought about this one or not, and I'm saying this because I kind of saw that in our neighborhood this week. But what about what risks do we run with our outdoor sprinkler systems? I mean, and the reason I say that is obviously one of our neighbors had one, but I think his, how they pop up, and I don't think, a lot of times they don't pop back down. And so I don't know if they're holding water, but he had one burst the other night. So I don't know if it burst from the cold weather, but we're all assuming. No one's actually talked to him yet, but he had water running all over his yard right from one of the spigots. So you would think being underground, you might not get that, but I mean, it can freeze down a couple of inches every. If you've ever been outside when it's cold and you hit the ground sometimes trying to dig something, you realize the ground's frozen. So is that, how do we, if I were a homeowner, is there a way to drain those lines, make sure that there's not water there, or what do I do?
You can, and most irrigation specialists I've talked to, based on how deep they're supposed to be, okay, most irrigation systems are usually somewhere in that vicinity of 6 to 8 inches in the ground. They're not really near the surface.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not saying that it's impossible for us to get that cold. Obviously, we've seen it lately.
Mm-hmm.
And we've seen it where it stayed below freezing for almost a week at one time. And we base our building codes on what's happened consistently. Let's say that,
Yeah, right.
So our building codes are not designed for Wisconsin. Our building codes are not designed for New York. Our building codes are designed for Texas. And your one-off situations are going to be different. But for irrigation in general, there is a way you can evacuate all the water out of it and blow it out, okay? You can turn the water off to your irrigation system. There are water control valves. You could do that if you wanted to. You could call an irrigation, specialist, somebody that specializes in sprinklers, come out and do that. But the way the system should be set up, there are valves that are allowing water to even go into those systems. So if you have a valve not working, you're allowing water to being in those lines at all times, that could be a problem or a malfunction of your system. But the valve should be set up to where they're not allowing water to go into those, lines and those sprinklers all the time, unless they are getting a call from the sprinkler box to actually initiate that line to open up and allow water to come out.
Okay.
But I will tell you this, you should not have your sprinklers on in the dead of winter, anytime really, because your grass is dormant. There's no reason. Your grass is dormant. There's no reason to water it. You're watering nothing. It's running off because the ground is so hard, it's so firm. It's nothing that's going to soak into it. And so there's no reason, unless you have some reason you decided to overseed. And you'll see these super green yards in the wintertime with rye and some other items. And a lot of cities have actually banned that. I don't know if you know that, but they don't want people using the water in the wintertime. So they've actually banned overseeding in some of these cities. So it's not necessary. You need to really, if you have certain plants in your garden or certain things in your yard, you need to hand water those. Your sprinkler system should pretty much be turned off, from here on out. Your grass is going to start turning dormant over the next couple of weeks, and it's done. And then we'll stay dormant up until, March.
Yeah.
So yeah, sprinklers in the wintertime, you're free. You always walk, and commercials are notorious about this. You'll drive down the street, and a commercial establishment will have the sprinklers running when it's 24 degrees outside, and it's causing ice to build up in the street. And you always hear about these people running into each other. Where at? In front of where the sprinklers were turned on.
Right.
No, but yeah, sprinkler systems is a good thing to look into. Make sure your valves are working. Make sure your sprinklers are off. You don't want that water, because another thing is, and I know we're running out of time, if your sprinklers are running and just because the water will get out of the sprinklers, when it turns off, you're cutting ice and you're building up problems and resistance with all those heads as well. So you will cause damage to a lot of your sprinkler heads by allowing them to go in cold weather.
Yep. That's and I'm sure we'll talk about that when springtime comes. Is how to check those sprinkler heads, because they can get damaged within the winter, because that plastic seems to harden really, and it can crack really easy. But yeah, Daniel, we are out of time. Unfortunately, I'm going to scroll your contact information and let you close us out. But I want to thank everybody for watching today, and another home cooking with Daniel Cook. So Daniel, thanks for hosting another great show. These were good tips. I learned some stuff today. So close us out, and we'll see everybody next week.
Awesome. Well, thank you very much for watching, folks. If you have any questions about home maintenance, feel free to give me a call, 833-COOK-DFW. You can email me, daniel@cookdfw.com. I'd love to get your questions and answer them for you. And then anything else that you need, feel free to reach out to us. We would love to talk to you. Well, have a good one. Talk to y'all later.